You have everything you need to survive. Food you didn't have to hunt, warmth you didn't have to build, a safety your ancestors would have killed for. By every measure that once decided whether a human being lived or died, you are already standing inside a kind of paradise. So why does something still feel wrong? In 1968, a scientist tried to answer that exact question, not with people, with mice. His name was John B. Calhoun, and he worked at the National Institute of Mental Health. He had spent years watching rodents, and he had an idea that unsettled him. He wanted to know what happens to a society when every physical problem is finally solved. Not some of them, all of them. So he built a world with no problems left to solve. He called it Universe 25. Picture a metal enclosure open at the top, roughly the size of a small room. Inside, food dispensers that never ran empty, water always flowing, a temperature held perfectly steady all year. No cats, no hawks, no disease allowed in. Nesting boxes stacked up the walls like tiny apartments waiting to be filled. For a mouse, it was heaven. Into this heaven, Calhoun placed 4 healthy pairs, 8 mice in a space built to hold thousands. Then he stepped back to watch. And at first, everything unfolded exactly as you would expect. The mice explored, they claimed territory, they mated. The population doubled roughly every 55 days. There were babies everywhere, tumbling out of the nesting boxes, and the little universe hummed with new life. This was the golden age. If you had looked in during those early months, you would have seen a thriving, growing, successful colony. Then slowly, something began to bend. Here is the part that matters, and it is the part almost everyone gets wrong. The enclosure never ran out of room. There was always more physical space to stand in, more food to eat, more water to drink, more empty boxes higher up the walls. What ran out was something you cannot see: social roles, purpose. The invitations a young mouse needs in order to become someone. Think about what a healthy mouse society actually requires. The males have to win and then defend a patch of territory. The females have to build calm nests and raise their young in peace. The young have to grow up, leave home, find their own corner of the world, and begin the cycle again. But in Universe 25, all the corners were already taken. Every territory had a defender who refused to leave, because in a closed world, no one ever moved away. Every social position was already filled by an animal that never aged out of it fast enough, and the young mice who kept being born by the hundreds arrived into a society that had no open place for them, nowhere to go, nothing to become. So they gathered in the middle. Calhoun watched pools of aimless young mice form in the center of the pen, crowding together, not because they were forced to, but because there was nowhere meaningful to be. He gave this a name that would follow him for the rest of his life. He called it the behavioral sink. A behavioral sink is what happens when too many individuals are pressed into the same social space and the ordinary rules of behavior begin to drain away. And once it started, it drained fast. The males who could not win any territory simply stopped trying. Some went completely passive, withdrawing into themselves. Others turned violent for no reason at all, attacking mice who had done nothing to them, then wandering off as if nothing had happened. The females, with no quiet territory left to nest in, began to fail at the one thing that kept the colony alive. They abandoned their young. Some attacked their own pups. Nests fell apart. Birth rates dropped, then dropped again, then collapsed toward nothing. Now here is the strangest part of all. A new kind of mouse appeared, one Calhoun had never seen before. He called them the beautiful ones. These were mice that withdrew from the chaos completely. They did not fight, they did not court, they did not try to mate or claim anything or defend anything or take part in the struggle in any way. They simply ate, slept, and groomed themselves over and over until their coats were flawless. On the outside, they looked perfect, untouched, pristine, the healthiest animals in the entire enclosure. But inside, something essential was missing. They had never learned to do any of the things that make a mouse a mouse. No courtship, no conflict, no parenting, no role. They had quietly opted out of society altogether, and they had no idea how to opt back in. Does any of that sound familiar to you yet? By around day 600, Universe 25 was effectively finished, not because it ran out of food, not because of a predator or a plague or a drought. The last surviving birth had already come and gone. The colony was now full of physically healthy, well-fed, immaculately groomed animals who had simply stopped participating in life. And then one by one, without ever being threatened by anything, they died out. In a paradise that gave them everything, the population fell all the way to zero. Calhoun did not think this was only a story about mice. He believed he had watched something collapse that had nothing to do with hunger or predators and everything to do with meaning. His fear was that a society could solve every material problem it had and still tear itself apart if it left its members with nowhere to matter. He even coined a chilling phrase for the final stage, when the animals were alive but the social world was already dead. He called it the second death. Now you should be careful here. And so eventually was the science. Mice are not people. A metal pen is not a city. For decades, Calhoun's work was used to argue frightening things about human crowding, immigration, and population, and much of that was a serious misreading. Two historians of science, Edmund Ramsden and John Adams, went back through Calhoun's records and correspondence years later, and they found that the popular version of the story had quietly bent the truth. The problem in Universe 25 was never simply too many bodies packed into too little space. It was the collapse of roles. It was what happens when individuals can no longer find a meaningful place among others, no matter how full the food dispenser is. Physical crowding was only the trigger. The real wound, the one that actually killed the colony, was social. And that single reframe is what makes this experiment refuse to leave you alone. Because think about the world you actually live in right now. You have more food, more comfort, and more physical safety than almost any human who has ever existed. You can reach 1,000 people before breakfast without leaving your bed. By every material measure, your dispensers are full to the top, and yet, there is a reason loneliness keeps climbing in the most connected societies on Earth. There is a reason that having everything can still leave a person feeling strangely hollow at the end of the day. Two psychologists, Roy Baumeister and Mark Leary, gave this a name in 1995. They called it the need to belong, and they argued that it is not some soft luxury sitting on top of survival. It is a drive as fundamental as hunger. Human beings do not simply need to be fed and kept safe. They need frequent, meaningful contact with people who actually know them, and a stable place inside a web of relationships that would notice if they were gone. Take that away, and no amount of comfort ever fills the space it leaves behind. So ask yourself something, honestly. When was the last time you felt truly needed by the people around you? Not liked, not seen, not entertained, needed, handed a role that only you could fill. That feeling, or the quiet absence of it, sits far closer to the heart of Universe 25 than any amount of overcrowding ever did. Because the beautiful ones were not destroyed by scarcity. They were dissolved by abundance without purpose. Everything was given to them, and nothing was ever asked of them. And slowly, they forgot how to be part of anything at all. They groomed, they rested, they looked perfect. And they contributed nothing to no one until the entire universe quietly switched itself off around them. You can probably picture the human version without much effort. The person who has slowly withdrawn into a small, controlled, comfortable world, screens instead of streets, curated feeds instead of real connection, safe, clean, self-contained, and quietly forgetting the messy, effortful skills that real relationships and real community have always demanded. But this is exactly where the mouse and the human finally part ways. And it is where you have something the beautiful ones never could. Calhoun himself did not spend his final years in despair. Strangely, he became obsessed with the opposite question. If the loss of meaningful roles could sink an entire society, then could deliberately designing for meaningful roles save one? He came to believe that the way out was never more space or more resources. It was more ways for individuals to matter, more chances to create, more reasons to be pulled into something larger than yourself. And that is the one thing the metal pen could never offer its animals. A mouse trapped in Universe 25 could not invent a new role for itself. It could not decide on its own to check on a struggling neighbor, or start something, or make itself useful on purpose. But you can. The pull toward the comfortable center, toward withdrawal, toward a beautiful and empty kind of solitude is completely real. You can feel it every day in a world that asks almost nothing of you. And yet the decision to step back into the mess, to be needed, to take up a role only you can fill, remains yours in a way it never once was theirs. So come back to where you started. You have everything you need to survive. Food you didn't hunt, warmth you didn't build, a safety your ancestors would have envied. By every ancient measure, you are already living inside the same paradise that 8 mice were handed in 1968. The only real question Universe 25 leaves you with is the one it could never answer for itself. Now that you have everything, what will you choose to become?